About a century and a half ago, many nations around the world began their quest for industrialization. The goal was to become more modernized and improve the quality of life for the people living there, as well as make their economies more prosperous. This was a huge movement for mankind as they introduced the age of machinery that would eventually transform into the highly intelligent computers we have today. However, within this seemingly excellent mission, there was a hidden problem that would not surface for years to come. With all the new fuel sources being used, emissions of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere rose more drastically than ever before. As the silent danger grew, people were unaware of the problems they set into motion as industries continued to increase and emitted more and more with rising production. Ultimately, this has led to the trend of global warming, ocean acidification, and glacier melting we are seeing today, which are related by their environmental impacts under the umbrella term climate change.
Climate change is having a significant impact on people and ecosystems. It is causing harsh changes in the environment, which makes it harder for many species to thrive. It also affects human health, agriculture, water supply, transportation, energy, and agriculture. It is predicted that these negative impacts will continue to increase throughout the century. When climate change occurs quickly, it does not give species enough time to adapt to the changes in their ecosystem. This causes a decrease in biodiversity. For example, cold-blooded animals like lizards are at risk of going extinct because they must spend more time balancing their body temperature and not enough time looking for food. The rising temperature of the Earth is also causing the Arctic regions to become smaller. The species that live there are at high risk of eventually losing their ecosystem. Another ecosystem that is being negatively affected by climate change is the ocean. In some areas of the ocean, there is such a low amount of oxygen that no species are able to live there anymore. In coastal regions, sea levels are rising from the effects of climate change. The number of storms along the coast is also increasing, which is leading to a higher risk of erosion and flooding. The rising temperatures are also increasing the strength and number of hurricanes each year. This extreme weather will ruin buildings and homes and also destroy methods of transportation. This drastic change in weather could have a huge impact on people's lives, especially people who live in tropical areas. Another natural disaster that is occurring more frequently is wildfires. In some regions, this increase is often due to drought, decreased rainfall, and long periods of high temperatures. Extreme natural events are impacting and preventing ecosystems like forests and beaches from doing their job of shielding and protecting mainland areas from exposure. Extreme weather and temperatures in many different regions are causing problems for roads, railroad lines, airports, energy facilities, and military bases around the world. Climate change is also having a significant impact on the lifestyle of many people. One of the main areas it is affecting is water. Growing population already increases the need for water, and climate change makes this problem worse. In some places, rain may drop up to 40%, and this will cause not as big of a groundwater supply. Warmer temperatures are changing and decreasing many water sources that people depend on. Many regions are likely to experience water shortages, and the quality of their water may decrease as well from higher level of contaminants. The lack of water will also cause crop growing to be reduced. In agriculture, climate change will cause there to be a longer growing season. The winter or cold period will not last as long during the year. This can negatively impact agriculture because for some plants, the frost period during the winter is essential for them to come up at the right time in the spring. Some crops will produce too much and others will not produce enough. A longer growing season will also not necessarily lower the price of crops because cost of energy and water for the crops will rise. Climate change is having a significant impact on society. Human health is being impacted by a decrease in quality and condition of the air. Asthma and allergies are expected to worsen due to polluted air and longer season of pollination. Higher temperatures cause an increase in insects and diseases carried by them. Higher temperatures are also causing people to pay to keep things cool through air conditioning, and this is just releasing more emissions into the air. Humans are also losing natural resources and certain plants that are depended upon for food or medicine because of the loss of biodiversity. Climate change is causing significant change to natural and man-made environments, and it is becoming harder to adapt.
Global climate change has had massive impacts on glaciers all around the world. Record high surface temperatures have led to a worldwide decrease in glaciers and sea ice. Rising temperatures have caused the melting of these land features and in return the rising sea levels. This global phenomenon can be observed in the famous Glacier National Park. In 1910, this park consisted of 150 glaciers. Since then, 30 have melted and others have shrunken 2/3 of their size. It is predicted that in 30 years, all of these glaciers will be gone. So how did this all happen? The warming surface temperatures on Earth have caused changes in ice distribution, concentrations of salt in oceans, ocean levels, and ocean temperatures. There has been a massive thinning of sea ice in the Arctic over the last 50 years, amounting to an incredible 10% of all Arctic sea ice in the last 30 years alone. In other parts of the world, permafrost is warming and thawing, which has led to the sinking of ground levels in these areas up to 15 feet. When glaciers and sea ice melt, the water and glacial discharge from them travels into the oceans, causing them to rise in level and temperature. Global sea levels have risen 10 to 20 centimeters in the past 100 years, which has been the highest rate of change in history. This led to major effects on global coastlines. Subsidence, or the sinking of coastlines, has been observed for centuries. Studies have shown that coasts have subsided 3 feet each century, which can be a concern for the thousands of people living within 3 feet of the average sea level. Smaller countries positioned at this sea level have already begun implementing evacuation drills. Those at low-lying sea levels with large populations and little money, such as Bangladesh, are also at risk for major economic problems. However, it is not only the poor countries that will have hardships. Some wealthy countries, including the Netherlands, have already lost almost half of their land below sea level. Some researchers even predict that for every inch that the sea level rises, 8 feet of sandy beach shorelines could potentially disappear due to beach erosion. With increasing beach erosion, there is an increased risk of saltwater intrusion, the flow of saltwater into freshwater sources, depleting drinking water. So how exactly are these oceanic changes occurring? Ocean currents are largely responsible for the warming and cooling and watering of Earth's terrestrial surfaces. Winds and water densities carry heat from the equator to the north and south poles. This phenomenon is known as thermohaline circulation. As warm, salty water flows from the equator through the Atlantic and up towards the North Pole, the water loses heat to the air. As this coolness is combined with the salt content in the water, it leads to an increased density within that water. This water then seeks deeper into the ocean and surface water takes its spot. The deep, cold water flows to the South Atlantic, Indian, and Pacific Oceans and mixes back in with the warm water there, thus coming back to the surface. This process is known as the ocean conveyor belt. Changes in water temperature and salinity in the oceans can have a big impact on this process because ocean temperatures are rising at deeper ocean depths than ever before. Salt contents in the waters bordering the North Atlantic Sea are decreasing. This is the largest oceanic change in history. Oceans are important for absorbing carbon dioxide. They hold about 1/3 of the carbon dioxide produced by humans. Levels of carbon dioxide in the air are rising at the same rate as they are in the oceans, as they are on land. Carbon dioxide levels are rising at twice the rate in deeper ocean depths than they are at surface levels. In the late 1950s, it was measured that CO2 levels in the atmosphere would change by the season. As plants perform photosynthesis, take in carbon dioxide during the summer and release oxygen into the air, while in the fall and winter, the CO2 levels would rise due to plants releasing it into the air during respiration and decaying periods. From this time on, it was studied that the carbon dioxide levels also rose each year, caused by the burning of fossil fuels by humans for their homes, factories, and cars. Lastly, mountain glaciers are suffering impacts from climate change just as much as oceanic glaciers. In the 1920s, average yearly temperatures in the Arctic had risen between 2 and 4 degrees, and mountain glaciers were disappearing everywhere. By 1950, glacier area in Switzerland had decreased by 25% and in Caucasus by 15%. The rising surface air temperatures on Earth have caused these mountain glaciers and ice sheets to melt more rapidly.
In the past 400,000 years, carbon dioxide levels have never gone above 300 parts per million in the atmosphere. Today, however, we are at 400 parts per million, and this has risen to such a high level in the past 100 to 150 years alone, climbing from about 280 parts per million up to its current level in that short period of time. This is the highest and fastest spike we have ever seen in history and can be directly connected to the start of many industrial revolutions worldwide. Greenhouse gases in the atmosphere create an effective insulation on Earth by interfering with the way infrared radiation enters and leaves the planet. Thus, these gases increase the amount of heat trapped here, while also allowing the influx of more radiation from outer space to continue coming in. With the trends of CO2 continuing to build in the atmosphere, Earth's temperatures are rising very rapidly, and in fact, the entire 21st century so far has been record-setting, with many years overall and months within them smashing old records from the few centuries past. 2016 was both the warmest year on historical record and has set the record high temperatures for 8 out of the 12 months as well, which have also since been broken as we witnessed in this past winter of 2017. Rising temperatures may not sound so bad for people in temperate climates, but they have been linked closely with more severe weather phenomena elsewhere, and are putting certain animal and plant species at risk for endangerment and possible extinction due to loss of habitat and suitable living conditions. Increases of CO2 concentrations in the ocean especially have put many fish species and marine life under potential risk as living conditions are worsening beyond their capability to adapt to. Acidification in the top layer of the ocean caused by the industrial pollution and CO2 absorption has risen by 30% in the last 100 to 150 years, causing the big issues for sea life and associated trades. In addition, the pH of the ocean has been lowered by about 0.1, which is a huge difference despite the little number, for most sea life has very little means of homeostasis. Looking more specifically, in the last 50 years, the top 700 meters of the ocean rose about 0.3 degrees Fahrenheit, but as CO2 rises at more of an exponential rate, this has also started going up much quicker, and even a few degrees of variance can become too much for organisms living there, as they tend to be very sensitive to water conditions. One very serious instance of this that is currently happening is coral bleaching, with over 50% of U.S. coral reefs having been destroyed due to bleaching events in just the years 2005 and 2010 alone. Coral bleaching happens when waters become too warm for the types of microscopic zooxanthellae living in the pores of the coral to stay. When they evacuate the coral, it takes away the coral's color and food source, which ultimately leaves it susceptible to disease and makes it become brittle and weak. This is becoming a very large threat to the Great Barrier Reef, one of the most beautiful naturally occurring underwater wonders and an important part of the ocean ecosystem, as it is home to many otherwise vulnerable species of fish without its protection. With current trends, researchers predict that as our CO2 production continues to soar, lower levels of the ocean may start to be warmed and acidified as well, putting more fish and underwater plants in danger. Eventually, these issues may result in the irreversible extinction of thousands of marine species, which will be detrimental to both the ocean ecosystem and various maritime trade industries.
Overall, climate change will hurt the entire globe, from the weather to the wildlife, and in the end, the equator and the poles will definitely suffer.